The AC-130, an emblem of unyielding force where raw power and precision converge, has etched its mark across 6 decades of service. Adorned with advanced weaponry and cutting-edge technology, this aerial titan reigns supreme on the battlefield. From its early emergence in the Vietnam War to its pivotal role in modern conflicts, the AC-130 has proven relentless in its effectiveness. In 2021, Exercise Emerald Warrior embraced the Air Force Special Operations Command Strategic Guidance, the annual joint military exercise conducted by the Special Operations Command, or SOCOM. In this footage of the training exercise, we witness the indomitable might of this formidable gunship, obliterating objectives and leaving an enduring legacy. The AC-130 unveils its awe-inspiring might amidst the complexities of irregular warfare scenarios. The Lockheed AC-130 aircraft has come a long way to become the most effective gunship in the arsenal of the United States Air Force. It has served the American military for over 60 years and has proven itself in combat effectively. It was first introduced in 1967 after replacing the converted AC-47 Spooky gunship used during the early years of the Vietnam War. Since then, the AC-130 has evolved into 6 variants, specializing in close air support, intelligence gathering, surveillance, combat search and rescue, and forward air control. This C-130 Hercules transport-turned gunship carries side-firing weapons with state-of-the-art sensors, fire control, and navigation systems to provide saturation firepower over a specific area for extended periods during day and night operations. The main armament comprises 25mm Gatling guns, 40mm and 105mm cannons, alongside countermeasures. The gunship has a wingspan of 132 feet, a length of 97 feet, and a height of 38 feet. The latest variant of the AC-130 is powered by 4 Allison T56A 15 turboprop engines, each providing 4,300 shaft horsepower. This allows the AC-130 to reach up to 300 miles per hour with a service ceiling of 25,000 feet and an approximate range of 1,300 nautical miles. The AC-130U Spooky crew comprises a pilot, co-pilot, navigator, fire control officer, TV operator, loadmaster, infrared detection set operator, 4 aerial gunners, and 5 electronic warfare officers. The gunship employs synthetic aperture strike radar for long-range and adverse weather target detection and identification. The Spooky can track and engage 2 targets simultaneously with different ordnance. The modern sensor suite consists of multispectral television sensors, infrared sensors, and radar that allow the AC-130 to identify friendly ground forces anywhere, electronically and visually. Following its baptism of fire during the last years of the Vietnam War, the AC-130H fleet was modified for in-flight refueling capabilities. The aircraft was deployed to the Middle East during the hostage situation at the U.S. Embassy in Iran in 1979, and was also employed as part of Operation Urgent Fury in Grenada in 1983. AC-130s also provided close air support for U.S. forces during the American invasion of Panama in 1989, before being dispatched in large numbers to the Middle East for Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm. The AC-130s provided extensive CAS, or close air support, armed reconnaissance, and air interdiction missions. The USAF crews also conducted convoy escort, point air defense of ground bases, and other operations critical to the coalition war effort. On January 29, 1991, Saddam Hussein dispatched over 2,000 seasoned Iraqi troops to the Saudi Arabian city of Khafji to lure in U.S., British, and other coalition forces and engage them in costly house-to-house combat. U.S. reconnaissance aircraft detected large columns of Iraqi mechanized units heading to the city. They dispatched one group of AC-130H Spectre gunships to get rid of them. While the Iraqi forces engaged Saudi Arabians, the AC-130s leapt into the combat zone in the middle of the night to destroy the armored column. The Spectres wreaked havoc and demolished the advancing armored vehicles. Although some vehicles still reached the city, U.S. Marines and coalition forces were aided by other gunships to reinforce Khafji from further Iraqi incursions. Although the threat of SAMs, or surface-to-air missiles, was high as morning approached, one of the Spectre gunships stayed in Khafji to continue providing cover for the Marines. The crew of Spirit 03 decided to stay and fight the surrounding Iraqi troops. The AC-130 provided intense CAS support and went after an Iraqi rocket battery, which had to be destroyed. As the aircraft approached its target, one Strela 2 manpad shot it down. All 14 crew members were lost, but the bravery and sacrifice of Spirit 03 were not forgotten. Almost 1 month later, on February 26, 1991, another AC-130 providing CAS support made it to the history books. The gunship belonged to the Special Operations Squadron and was piloted by Captain Richard S. Beef Haddad and First Lieutenant Randall L. Bright. Their gunship targeted a road that connected Kuwait City to Baghdad and became later known as the Highway of Death due to the sheer scale of the destruction caused that night. Although the number of casualties is unknown, footage and pictures from the highway show the devastation caused by the single AC-130. Over 2,000 vehicles were destroyed. The loss of Spirit 03 resulted in the deployment of the AN/AAQ-24 Directed Infrared Countermeasures System to protect aircraft from close-range launchers. Lessons learned from AC-130 operations during the First and Second Gulf Wars were later perfected in Exercise Emerald Warrior. It's the largest joint special operations training event in the U.S. SOCOM, or Special Operations Command. The exercises include special forces units from all the branches of the U.S. military, and sometimes foreign teams from allied nations. Emerald Warrior prepares units for different threats they can encounter on the battlefield. Since 2001, the exercise has been focused on counterterrorism operations, but has also covered cyber warfare, intelligence warfare, close air support, and hostage rescue. The annual joint military exercise focuses on complex, irregular warfare scenarios. Several variants of the AC-130 have participated in Emerald Warrior throughout the years. From the AC-130H Spectre to the AC-130U Spooky and the AC-130W Stinger II, all have participated in military exercises, providing close air support, reconnaissance, and more. AC-130 crews participate in these programs, doing what they do best, being the eyes and guardian angels of ground troops as they approach to seize critical objectives. The crews operate the aircraft's weapons with great efficiency and accuracy. For instance, airmen inspect and load the powerful General Dynamics GAU rotary cannons. Ammunition and shells from the Bofors cannons and the ATK GAU-23A are emptied, while other airmen monitor their performance. Men from the ground watch the approaching gunships, which provide close air support against previously designated targets. Other AC-130s are spotted as they fly above an objective and fire at the ground. Emerald Warrior also involves nighttime operations. The Lockheed aircraft display their effectiveness by firing thousands of tracer rounds with pinpoint accuracy to saturate a specific portion of the battlefield. The devastation of the strikes is appreciated by the shattered remains of the locations where the rounds made contact. Troops confirm the hits and continue targeting objectives for the AC-130 during the night operations. Other gunships maneuver above the clouds while releasing flares to avoid enemy fire as part of a countermeasures exercise. More impressive shots are also captured by onboard thermal cameras focusing on the rotary cannons as they fire thousands of rounds a minute. Inside the gunship, weary crewmen are seen loading the lethal 105mm M102 howitzer during day and night operations, as well as other cannons. Lastly, after a day of operations, the AC-130 lands at an airfield for refueling and inspection before taking to the skies for another day. After rising tensions between Libya and the United States for most of the decade, it all came to a head on January 4th, 1989. As the aircraft carrier USS John F. Kennedy sailed through the Mediterranean Sea with multiple aircraft from its air wing for training exercises and patrol missions, they detected 2 Libyan Air Force MiG-23 floggers taking off from a nearby airbase and heading toward the carrier. 2 F-14 Tomcats were sent to investigate and intercept the floggers, but to their surprise, the Libyan aircraft were heading on a collision course in their direction. and while the American jets performed maneuvers to try and avoid direct engagement with the Russian-made aircraft, they didn't seem to be going away. Within minutes, the mission would turn from a routine patrol flight to a full-fledged dogfight that would threaten international relations. Luckily for the Americans, the supersonic dogfight was caught on video and declassified many years later for the world to witness. Following a military coup in 1969, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi established a dictatorship in Libya. After gaining a lot of money from oil exports, the leader became one of the world's most prominent and outspoken sponsors of terrorism. In 1973, the new Libyan leader claimed much of the Gulf as its territorial waters, and he subsequently imposed a rule in which whoever crossed it would invite a military response. As such, Libya became a significant security challenge to the West. President Ronald Reagan's administration was particularly concerned about the North African nation's potential attempts to obtain weapons of mass destruction, as Libya was considered a state sponsor of terrorism. Not willing to recognize Libya's territorial claims, the United States continuously challenged the limits to keep its military presence in the region, including activities like stationing aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean. Because of this, the United States Navy had several close encounters with the Libyan military in the Gulf of Sidra in the 1980s. In 1981, two American carrier-based F-14 Tomcat jet fighters got involved in a fierce dogfight with two Libyan Su-22s. Soon, the Soviet-made fighters were blasted out of the sky by the Americans after firing first, but the engagement proved that the Libyan pilots were willing and capable of being highly aggressive. Moreover, tensions between America and Libya peaked in 1988, when the U.S. accused the North African nation of building a chemical weapons plant. During a December 1988 press interview, President Reagan discussed the potential of ordering military action to destroy the building. The possibility of a full-fledged United States Armed Forces attack forced the Libyan government to increase its air defenses around the plant in Rabta and prompted a military alert throughout the country. On January 4, 1989, the Navy supercarrier USS John F. Kennedy was sailing to Haifa, Israel, for a scheduled port visit. Despite being close to the Gulf of Sidra, where tensions were at an all-time high, the vessel was 120 miles north, closer to Crete. Early in the morning, 4 F-14 Tomcats took off to perform a combat air patrol mission close to the Gulf of Sidra, with an E-2C aircraft supporting them. For safety reasons, the identities of the crews involved in the mission remained classified for many years. However, we now know that the two easternmost F-14s in the formation, both from Strike Fighter Squadron 32 Swordsman, were callsign Gypsy 207, flown by Commander Joseph B. Connolly, and Commando Leo Enright as radar intercept officer, and callsign Gypsy 202, manned by Lieutenant Herman Cook III and Lieutenant Commander Stephen Collins. After being refueled by a Ka-60 Intruder and armed with 4 Sparrows and 2 Sidewinders, the Tomcats returned to their cap station. Suddenly, the Hawkeye aircraft support warned them of 2 Libyan MiG-23 floggers taking off from the AI Bumba airfield, and the duo was sent to investigate. Soon after, their radars identified the floggers at a distance of about 70 miles and locked up, a procedure used to alert the Libyan aircraft that they were being monitored by armed Tomcats. Flying at high speeds, the American pilots then conducted a series of turns and lowered their altitude to persuade the enemies to turn away. However, the Libyans matched all the turns, even accelerating to ensure they were approaching the Tomcats head-on. One thing was clear: they were not slowing down. As the floggers closed in on the Tomcats, the E-2 and other American assets began monitoring radio communications between the Libyan aircraft and their ground controllers. They were all surprised while listening to the MiGs receiving guidance to intercept the F-14s from ground controllers at one of the radar stations activated along the coast. Meanwhile, the American pilots worried that the Libyans could be carrying some type of air-to-air weapon, particularly Soviet-made AA-7 Apex missiles with a range of 12 miles. As such, Kennedy's air warfare commander warned the F-14 crews, and allowed them to fire if they felt the floggers had hostile intentions. The duo then took position underneath the MiG-23s, which allowed them to use ocean clutter to confuse the Russian-made radars. They then made 5 more turns, but they were all matched by the relentless Libyan opponents. The Americans began preparing their weapons as they got within 20 miles of the Libyan jets. Then, upon reaching 13, Commander Leo Enright fired an AIM-7 Sparrow missile at one of the MiGs without telling his pilot, but it failed. Enright fired a second missile at 10 miles, but it also missed. The 2 Tomcats then conducted a defensive split maneuver, with Gypsy 207 turning left and Gypsy 202 turning right. At that moment, the Libyan MiGs turned and headed straight for Gypsy 202. That's when Collins from Gypsy 202 fired an AIM-7, hitting one of the Libyan aircraft at a range of roughly 5 miles. Gypsy 207 then moved behind the other MiG-23, and after some difficulty acquiring a lock, fired an AIM-9 Sidewinder that brought down the second Libyan fighter. Before returning to the Kennedy supercarrier, both F-14 crews reported seeing the Libyan pilots eject and deploy their parachutes. In the days following the engagement, Libyan officials claimed that the floggers were unarmed reconnaissance aircraft. Gaddafi even went as far as calling for a United Nations emergency session to discuss the incident. However, U.S. spokespeople claimed the American aircrews acted in self-defense on the January 4th incident due to demonstrations of hostile intent by the Libyan MiG-23s. Defense Secretary Frank Carlucci even expressed that, if anything, the F-14s had fired too late. Thankfully, the incident was recorded in the Tomcat's television camera system. Also known as TCS, the camera was mounted under the F-14's nose, a feature that enhanced the crew's ability to identify the enemy early in an engagement. Despite being a little blurry, the footage shows that the MiG-23s were indeed armed with air-to-air AA-7 Apex missiles, proving once and for all that the Libyan fighters represented a real threat. While later investigations revealed that the floggers never switched on their fire control radars, their actions did appear to be hostile, especially since Gaddafi was most likely concerned about his own chemical facility in Rabta. To this day, the exact intent of the Libyan aircraft that day remains unknown, and while the Libyan pilots were seen ejecting out of their floggers and parachuting into the ocean, it remains a mystery if they were ever rescued. In December 2017, a blurry photograph of an Air Force F-4 Phantom flying upside down in an intercept mission on a Russian Bear Tu-95 went viral. This stunt bewildered its viewers. The feat was dangerous enough, but performing it near one of the Soviet Union's favorite strategic bombers was even more perplexing. Fortunately, Robert Ziller, the photographer, still remembers the story behind the stunt. The McDonnell F-4 Phantom is an American twin-engine jet interceptor and fighter bomber capable of supersonic speeds. Initially developed for the U.S. Navy, it entered service in 1961. After proving to be highly adaptable, it was also flown by the Marine Corps. The aircraft became a staple for the United States Air Force, and over 5,000 were produced. During its 4 decades of active service to the U.S., the Phantom set 16 world performance records. The interceptor also serviced at least 15 other militaries across the world. The Russian Tupolev Tu-95, also known as the Bear, is a large turboprop-powered strategic bomber. The Bear is known for the loud sound made by its propeller's blades, which move faster than the speed of sound. It entered service with the Soviet Union in 1956, and is expected to continue to operate with the Russian Aerospace Force until at least 2040. This viral picture shows an F-4 Phantom, which most likely belongs to the U.S. Air Force, flying in an inverted position on a Russian Tu-95 Bear during an intercept mission. After the photograph went viral on social media, it eventually reached Robert Bob M. Ziller, its author. In an interview with The Aviationist, Mr. Ziller recalled the event, which had happened over 40 years prior, in either late 1973 or early 1974. The F-4 Phantom belonged to the 57th Fighter Interceptor Squadron, or FIS, which was active intermittently from 1940 until 1995. Also known as the Black Knights, the 57th FIS was stationed at the Naval Air Station in Keflavik, Iceland, and operated up to 10 F-4s. In a barrel roll, sometimes confused with the aileron roll, the airplane rotates 360 degrees around the longitudinal axis. At the same time, its nose makes a circle about a real or imagined reference point on the horizon. This reference can be anything in that area, like a distant lake, a mountain peak, or a cloud. In it, the pilot performs the maneuver by doing a combination of a roll and a loop. Upon completing the roll, the airplane ends up flying along the same path before and at roughly the same altitude at which the maneuver began. The barrel roll gets its name because an aircraft executing this maneuver looks like it's flying with its wheels running around the inside wall of an imaginary cylinder lying on its side. The stunt was first performed in 1905 and used for aerial shows and dogfighting, where it has several variations. According to the photographer, the mission was a standard intercept of the Russian Bear by 2 Phantoms after the alert crews were activated. Ziller had been in the USAF since 1969. He was a navigator and occasionally flew the Phantom as a weapons system officer. While on active duty, he spent a few years in California flying C-141s before moving to Iceland with the Black Knights. As he recalled, quote, "The assignments to Iceland were generally either 1 or 2 years. I elected to do 1 year, without my family accompanying me there. Others chose to bring their families for 2 years." Also in the email interview, he recalled their close encounters with the Russian Bear Tu-95s, which, as it turns out, were quite common. Quote, "At that time, we probably averaged 2 intercepts of Bears per week. They were the only aircraft we saw while I was there. Generally, the intercepts occurred on Fridays and Sundays, as the Bears flew from Murmansk to Cuba on training and, we guess, fun missions. Generally, we did these barrel rolls at the request of the Soviet crew members. They gave us hand signals to let us know they wanted us to do it. They photographed us as well. The Cold War was winding down, and the attitudes on both sides had improved." According to Mr. Ziller, the stunt the Phantom is performing in the picture was a maneuver they performed habitually. When talking about the barrel roll maneuver's level of difficulty, he commented, quote, "The rolls were not dangerous at all." On the night of January 17th, 1991, there was no moon, only pitch-black darkness. 8 Apache helicopters and 2 Payablo 3s from Task Force Normandy were on their way to destroy Iraqi radar sites near the border, flying 50 feet above the ground to avoid detection. The odds were high. If the task force did not eradicate the targets, the Iraqis would launch their jets and intercept the upcoming Allied aircraft. Footage taken directly from the Apaches shows the rotorcraft approaching their objectives with night vision goggles, and the exact moment they saw the radar sites over the horizon. A pilot then broke radio silence, saying, quote, "Party in 10. Seconds later, the helicopters launched their missiles. On August 2nd, 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait with 4 elite Republican Guard divisions and some special operations commandos. Saudi Arabia quickly reacted and asked President George H.W. Bush for help. The United States then launched Operation Desert Shield and organized a coalition of 35 nations. Soon, General Schwarzkopf and his commandos began studying Iraq's early warning and ground control intercept sites close to the border with Kuwait. The objective was to create a corridor from which Allied aircraft could penetrate enemy territory without being detected. The top officials envisioned 3 options for removing Iraq's Soviet-supplied ground control intercept sites. One plan involved using special operations forces to insert and remove the radar sites with missiles. The second one called for special operators to approach the radar sites and use handheld laser designators to mark the spots, followed by an attack from Apache helicopters. And the final option was to use conventional fighter jets to destroy the intended targets. The strategic planners from the United States Central Command, or CENTCOM, knew that jet aircraft or cruise missiles would get the job done, but they also wanted to ensure the objectives were entirely destroyed. There needed to be proof of the damage to the targets, preferably from actual witnesses. However, the options involving special forces were deemed too risky, as they could be detected before the Allied aircraft arrived. Consequently, CENTCOM came up with a hybrid idea, a helicopter task force. The American planners concluded that helicopter pilots would also be able to accomplish the mission, with their vast and lethal arsenal of missiles, but most importantly, assess the damage they had done. If the objectives were not destroyed during the first attack, the pilots could continue engaging the targets until the task was completed. In September of 1990, CENTCOM approved a helicopter assault package and began looking for a high-quality unit to get the job done. The 1st Battalion, 101st Airborne Regiment, 101st Airborne Division, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Richard Dick Cody, was a natural choice. From the moment the first American units arrived in Saudi Arabia, Colonel Cody and his men had stood out for being the finest of the 14 Apache units stationed in the Gulf. On the 25th, Cody was summoned by Colonel Jesse Johnson to the U.S. Special Operations Command Central Headquarters in King Fahd Airport, where he provided an outline of CENTCOM's plan, adding that he was hand-picked for a classified operation still in the works. Cody was tasked to lead a strike force comprising 12 helicopters, 9 AH-64 Apaches, 2 Air Force MH-553J enhanced Pavlo 3s, and 1 UH-60A Black Hawk. They would venture into hostile territory to knock out Iraqi radar and ground control interception sites, as the coalition needed to destroy them before launching a large-scale attack. In addition, Cody and his unit had to open a straight path into Baghdad for the coalition's aircraft. If they failed, air operations would become more complex, and Iraqi fighters would gain intelligence on American and Allied fighters. Once the briefing ended, Colonel Johnson got to the point and asked Cody, quote, "If we can get it conceptually approved, do you think we can do that?" Cody, who knew his Apache pilots very well, laconically replied with a simple yes. According to Richard Mackenzie's article, Apache Attack from October of 1991, Colonel Johnson added, quote, "If we get the go-ahead even to train for this, it'll be based on you saying you can take it out 100%. Like a stoic warrior, Cody replied, quote, "That's not a problem, sir." Colonel Cody handpicked 8 of his 24 men, and the pilots began training immediately. However, no one was told the true nature of the secret mission. Task Force Normandy practiced special operations raids in the desert during nighttime, conducted several live fire exercises, and even infiltrated enemy airspace, among other activities. They trained hard, but were not given much information about the targets they would destroy or when the war would begin. The plan called for the Pavlos from the Air Force to be the eyes of the Apaches, as the available maps were unreliable, and the task force would have to rely on these aircraft's state-of-the-art Global Positioning System, or GPS. The Pavlos would enhance the Doppler system of the Apaches to give them extreme accuracy in locking onto targets located as far as 15 kilometers away. Once Task Force Normandy was ready, and their Apaches, with their powerful 30mm chain guns, Hellfire missiles, and 2.75-inch rockets were inspected, it was only a matter of time before launching the first coalition attack of the Gulf War. Before Christmas of 1990, General Colin Powell, the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman, and Dick Cheney, the Secretary of Defense, approved the secret operation. And less than 3 weeks later, Colonel Johnson ordered Task Force Normandy to relocate to Al Juf, an outpost near Iraq's border. Things were about to go down. H-hour came during the morning of January 17th. Colonel Cody split his force into 2 teams. He led the white team, and Captain Newman Shufflebarger led the red one, which would follow 10 minutes later. The radar sites were separated by over 70 miles, and the 2 teams had to strike simultaneously. Cody explained, quote, "It would do no good to hit one radar site, and 2 minutes later to hit another one. We had to do it in such a way that we took down critical elements of those radar sites simultaneously, so that Baghdad was not alerted to get its MiG-29s and ground control intercept systems up." The Pavlos led the way in the pitch-black darkness, and footage taken directly from the Apaches shows how they made their way into enemy airspace with night vision goggles. Both teams flew at altitudes 50 feet above the ground to avoid being detected. Some 30 miles close to the radar site, the Pavlos gave their last position update and then turned back. Then, at almost 2:38 a.m., Lieutenant Tom Drew finally gave the order to attack. The 8 AH-64 Apaches unleashed all the firepower they were carrying into the enemy installations, with their cameras showing the radar stations on the horizon being torn apart by the Hellfire missile explosions. The rockets from other Apaches are also seen making their way to the clouds of flames and debris. Concrete, metal, glass, and enemy personnel were consumed by the explosions. The helicopters kept flying for over 4 minutes, ensuring every communications facility, generator, and other structures were 100% destroyed. It took 27 missiles, 70 rockets, and over 4,000 rounds of 30mm rounds to achieve total destruction. Task Force Normandy then turned and never looked back. Colonel Cody sent a radio signal indicating the radar sites were destroyed, and a 20-mile wide strip for coalition aircraft to venture into Iraqi territory was now open. About 5 minutes into the flight back, Cody and his men saw jets flying over their heads. They were F-117As on their way to drop the first bomb of the war.